At the family barbecue, my father's laughter cut through the evening air as he declared, "You're old enough to pay rent or get out. This isn't a charity." 24 hours later, when I handed him the keys to my new house and informed the family I would no longer subsidize their lifestyle, their faces turned ashen. They had no idea what was coming. The smoky aroma of grilling steaks should have been comforting, but nothing could mask the tension that had been building for months. I stood at the edge of my father's backyard, watching him flip burgers with the same casual confidence he displayed when discussing my finances, as if both were his to control. "Madison!" His voice boomed across the patio, cutting through conversations and drawing unwanted attention. "You're 25 years old. Time to pay rent or find somewhere else to live. This house isn't running a charity operation." The laughter that erupted wasn't just his. Denise, my stepmother, let out that practiced giggle she reserved for moments when she wanted to appear supportive while remaining safely on the sidelines. My half-brother Tyler, sprawled in a lawn chair with his third beer, smirked as if he had just witnessed the evening's entertainment. The neighbors, pretending to focus on their conversations, shifted uncomfortably as the family drama unfolded in full view. Heat rushed to my cheeks, but not from embarrassment, from years of suppressed rage finally reaching its boiling point. I had been contributing half of my monthly salary to this household for 3 years, covering utilities, groceries, car insurance, and emergency expenses. My contributions had kept their lights on, their internet running, and their refrigerator stocked. Yet here I stood, being publicly humiliated as if I were some freeloading burden. I set down my plate with deliberate precision, the paper edges crinkling under my grip. "You've been taking half my paycheck for years, Dad. I've been paying more than my share of everything." His expression shifted into that condescending shrug he had perfected, the one that made me feel small and unreasonable. "Welcome to adult life, sweetheart. If you don't like the arrangement, you're free to make other plans." Tyler chuckled under his breath. "Good luck affording anything on your own." The casual cruelty of their dismissal crystallized something inside me. I had spent 3 years believing I was contributing to a family unit, supporting people who cared about my well-being. Instead, I had been functioning as an unpaid financial advisor and primary breadwinner while being treated like an ungrateful dependent. I stepped closer to my father, close enough that the flickering flames from the grill illuminated the smugness on his face. "Fine. You want me gone. You'll get exactly what you're asking for." His laugh was sharp and mocking. "And where exactly do you plan to go?" "Back to that studio apartment that fell apart. You've got no savings, Madison. You've been living beyond your means for years." The irony was suffocating. I had no savings precisely because I had been subsidizing their lifestyle, covering expenses they should have managed independently. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been quietly preparing for this moment for months. The remainder of the evening passed in a haze of forced pleasantries and whispered conversations. I smiled when appropriate, responded to questions with practiced politeness, and gave no indication that their world was about to shift dramatically. Inside, however, I was calculating timelines, reviewing documents, and finalizing plans that had been months in the making. By the time the last guest departed, I had made my decision. If they wanted me gone, I would show them exactly how thoroughly I could disappear, and how much they had been depending on my presence. The following morning, I loaded my belongings into my car with hands that trembled from anticipation rather than anxiety. Each box represented another step toward independence, another severance of the financial umbilical cord that had been draining my resources and stunting my growth. My new home was modest but entirely mine. A 2-story house with white siding and a wraparound porch that spoke of possibility rather than obligation. The air felt different here, cleaner somehow, as if I could finally breathe without calculating the cost of each inhale. By noon, I had the deed properly transferred and my name officially established as the sole owner. I photographed the document, saved it to my phone, and sent a brief message to my father. "I have moved out as requested. All household expenses are now your responsibility." The response came within an hour. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls from my father, then Denise, then Tyler. I allowed each call to ring through to voicemail, savoring the silence that followed. For the first time in 3 years, someone else was experiencing the panic of unpaid bills and financial uncertainty. By evening, I heard the familiar rumble of my father's truck in the driveway. Through my window, I watched him emerge, his face pale and drawn, followed by Denise, whose usual composure had been replaced by obvious distress. Tyler remained in the vehicle, apparently recognizing that this confrontation required adult intervention. I stepped onto my porch as my father reached the bottom of the steps. His voice, when he finally spoke, lacked its usual commanding tone. "You can't be serious about this." I leaned against the railing, arms crossed, meeting his gaze with newfound confidence. "You made your position clear yesterday. Pay rent or leave. Chose to leave. And now I'm also choosing to stop subsidizing your household expenses." The color drained from his face completely. Denise, standing slightly behind him, opened her mouth but produced no sound. For the first time in my adult life, I realized the extent of the power I had been freely giving away, and how dramatically the balance could shift when I chose to reclaim it. After they departed, I remained on my porch, breathing deeply and processing the magnitude of what I had initiated. This wasn't relief I was experiencing. Not yet. It was the first breath I had taken in years that didn't come with a price tag attached. I went inside, opened my laptop, and began the systematic process of severing every financial connection. Electric bill, removed from my account. Gas service, transferred to their name. Internet, water, car insurance, each service methodically disconnected from my financial responsibility. With every confirmation email, I felt my spine straighten and my sense of self-worth solidify. The phone calls began again within hours. Text messages flooded my device with increasingly desperate pleas and accusations. "This isn't funny. The Wi-Fi is down. You can't just abandon family. Hope you're satisfied. You've ruined everything." I responded with a single message to their group chat. "I have relocated as requested. All expenses are now your responsibility. Please respect my privacy and do not arrive unannounced." Their second visit came the following day. This time, my father's approach was more strategic, attempting negotiation rather than intimidation. "Enough of this demonstration. You've made your point. Restore the accounts for 1 week while we arrange alternative payment methods." I met his gaze without wavering. "You've been extracting half my income for 3 years. You made your position unmistakably clear at the barbecue. I am gone, and so is my financial support." Denise's bitter laugh cracked through the air. "This is remarkably cold behavior." "No," I replied, stepping closer. "Cold is publicly humiliating your child in front of neighbors. This is simply the natural consequence of that decision." My father's mouth opened, but no words emerged. For the first time in our relationship, I witnessed something I had never seen before: genuine uncertainty. He was realizing that his primary source of financial stability had just evaporated, and he had no contingency plan. I returned to my porch and closed the door firmly behind me. For the first time in years, I was the one controlling access, and it felt revolutionary. The following morning brought the kind of silence that had never existed in my father's house. No thundering footsteps, no blaring television, no arguments about misplaced receipts or overdue bills. Just peaceful quiet that allowed me to think clearly for the first time in years. I prepared coffee in my bright kitchen, watching steam curl into sunlight that streamed through clean windows. My phone buzzed with unknown numbers and increasingly frantic messages, but I refused to allow their chaos to contaminate my newfound peace. By noon, Denise arrived alone, attempting a different strategy. Her smile was brittle and forced as she requested temporary assistance with Tyler's car insurance for a job interview. I declined, explaining that the policy was now registered to my address and covered only my vehicle. "You're punishing us," she accused, the mask of friendliness slipping away. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm refusing to be punished anymore." Her facade cracked completely. Your father is extremely upset. You understand he only behaves this way because of stress. The automotive shop closing has been difficult. That shop closed 3 years ago, I interrupted. He's had 36 months to develop alternative income streams instead of relying on mine. That evening, while unpacking in my living room, I discovered something alarming. My bank had detected suspicious login attempts and alerted me to a credit card account I had never opened, registered to my name but with an address I didn't recognize. I remembered my purse disappearing briefly the previous year, reappearing 2 days later with nothing obviously missing. The pieces connected rapidly. I printed every email, every statement, every piece of evidence, and filed them in a folder labeled Legal Documentation. I wasn't merely protecting myself anymore. I was building a comprehensive case for potential fraud charges. At midnight, Tyler sent a threatening text. "You think you're superior now? Monitor your mailbox carefully." I stared at the screen, feeling my anger crystallize into something colder and more strategic. They weren't just losing my financial support, they were losing control over me entirely. And the more they realized this, the more desperate and potentially dangerous they would become. The next several days passed quietly. Too quietly. Occasional sarcastic texts from Tyler arrived, but I kept my responses brief and documented every interaction as my attorney had advised. Every word, every date, every attempt at manipulation was carefully preserved. On the third morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Screenshots from friends and neighbors revealed Denise's social media campaign. Carefully crafted posts designed to generate sympathy without providing specific details. Some people abandon family when they think they've outgrown them. After everything we've sacrificed, they leave us in darkness. Literally. The comments were predictable. Mutual acquaintances offering support, distant relatives asking for explanations, and the usual chorus of online sympathy. Notably, none of them tagged me or mentioned my name. They wanted to control the narrative without giving me an opportunity to respond. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I contacted every utility company to confirm the account transfers were complete and irreversible. I wasn't providing them with even the smallest opening for manipulation. By noon, my father appeared at my door again, alone this time, hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. His demeanor was calmer but still carried that underlying edge of barely controlled anger. "We have a serious situation," he began. "The mortgage payment is due, and without your contribution." "Not my responsibility," I interrupted before he could complete his manipulation attempt. His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Do you hear yourself? You were part of this household for years. You can't simply abandon your obligations overnight." I laughed. Actually laughed, sharp and without humor. "You mean the obligations you assigned to me without consultation the moment I started earning income? The responsibilities you never discussed, just assumed I would handle indefinitely?" He stepped closer, attempting to intimidate through proximity. "You think this new house makes you superior? That you can hide here while we struggle?" I met his stare without flinching. "I'm not hiding, Dad. I'm simply finished being your personal ATM." His jaw worked furiously, as if chewing on a dozen unspoken threats. Finally, he turned to leave, but not before delivering one final attempt at emotional manipulation. "You'll regret this decision when you come begging for forgiveness." I closed the door slowly, almost savoring the definitive click of the lock. Begging wasn't in my vocabulary anymore. Not when I finally understood my own worth. That night, as the sun set and the air cooled, I received a call from a neighbor near my former residence. Their voice was conspiratorial, sharing gossip about the loud argument they had witnessed in the driveway, something about overdrawn accounts and blame assignment. They were experiencing the full weight of financial responsibility for the first time, struggling under the burden I had carried alone for 3 years. The irony was not lost on me. The next day I made one final strategic move. I visited the bank, met with a manager, and closed the last joint account they still had access to. When I left, the folder in my bag felt heavier, thicker, more complete, a comprehensive record of their financial dependence and my systematic withdrawal of support. That evening brought one last desperate text from Denise. "You've demonstrated your point effectively. We understand now. Please assist us through this month. We'll establish independence afterward." I didn't respond. 2 hours later, her public social media post appeared. "Interesting how people change when they believe they no longer need family. But life has a method of humbling everyone eventually." For once, she was absolutely correct. Life does humble everyone. And their humbling was only beginning. The perfect conclusion arrived the following Saturday morning. While reviewing emails over coffee, I noticed a message from the mortgage company regarding my father's address. The subject line read, "Urgent, past due balance and public auction notice." Initially, I assumed it was an error. I had been removed from all accounts weeks ago. However, upon opening it, I realized the bank still listed me as an emergency contact from years past. The letter was brutally direct. 2 missed payments, no payment arrangement, auction scheduled within 30 days. I sat there, staring at the screen, recognizing this moment as the universe providing undeniable proof that their confident facade had been built entirely on smoke and mirrors. Previously, I might have rushed over to resolve their crisis, draining my savings account once again to rescue them from consequences. Now, I pressed print and filed the document in my legal folder. By noon, the inevitable confrontation arrived. All 3 of them stood on my porch, my father red-faced with fury, Denise attempting to maintain dignity, Tyler smirking as if he still believed this was some game he could win. I stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind me. My father wasted no time. "You received the foreclosure notice. We cannot lose this house, Madison. You're going to help resolve this situation immediately." I folded my arms. "No, I am not. You're still family," he shouted, loud enough for neighbors across the street to pause their activities and observe. I didn't lower my voice. "Family doesn't exploit you as a personal bank account. Family doesn't humiliate you publicly for entertainment. Family doesn't commit identity fraud and expect silence." Denise stepped forward, glancing nervously at the growing audience. "Must you create a public spectacle?" "Yes," I said flatly. "Since you had no problem creating one when it served your purposes." Tyler muttered under his breath, "This is absolutely unbelievable." I turned to face him directly. "You're correct. It is unbelievable that I tolerated this exploitation for as long as I did." My father's voice dropped to that quiet, threatening tone he employed when attempting intimidation. "If you walk away from this crisis, you will be nothing to us. Dead to this family." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I'll be nothing to you and everything to myself. That sounds like an excellent trade." I stepped back toward my door, but before entering, I pulled the printed foreclosure notice from my folder and held it high where they could all see clearly. "This," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the afternoon air, "is what happens when the person you've been systematically draining finally stops bleeding for your benefit." I dropped the paper at their feet and closed the door with a solid, satisfying click. Through my blinds, I watched them stand frozen, my father paralyzed by the reality of his situation, Denise glancing anxiously at the neighbors who had witnessed everything, Tyler kicking the paper as if it might bite him. They departed without another word. That evening, I posted a single, carefully crafted line on my own social media. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to stand independently. The supportive comments rolled in. Friends congratulating me on my new home, neighbors offering encouragement, colleagues sending private messages of solidarity. Not once did I mention them by name or provide specific details. Their downfall was no longer my story to tell. It was theirs to live. And I was finally completely free to live mine.